So, are you wondering how to be happy? Let me tell you, you're not alone. Today is my very first official episode after all the foundational basic episodes I've provided for you for the uh, weekly dose of higher consciousness. And I want to discuss the topic of how to be happy because according to my keyword research, I do Google research into what people are Googling, What are people Googling these days? And 40,000 people a month are Googling how to be happy. That's a month, and that's just the US alone. And other keyword phrases that people are using are like how to be happy alone, how to be happy with yourself, how to be happy in life, how to be happy single, how to be happy at work, how to be happy in relationships. It goes on and on and on. So, I mean, there's close to, I would say, 75,000 searches a month when you put them all together and see that people really want to understand how to be happy. So that is our topic for today. My name is Liz Gracia, and this is your weekly dose of higher consciousness. I am your trumpeter of truth, so to speak, on how to be happy today. But before I get started, I promise you guys, as part of the format, is I'm going to give you 3 things that have been calibrated as to their level of consciousness. And I want you to think about it. This is it's my weekly dose of higher consciousness quiz. So here are the 3 things. Each one of these is calibrated as to its level of consciousness. Salt of the earth is the first one. It's a concept. It's something, a word that we use or describe someone. They're considered the salt of the earth. The next word is supportive. So I want you to think about it. Is salt of the earth of higher consciousness than supportive and more power? So the higher level of consciousness, there's more inherent power in it. And finally, the last one is loyal. What is it? What's the level of consciousness to be loyal? So that's our quiz. And you think about that. You can write it down, and I'll give you the answer at the end of this podcast. So before we get started, I want to put happiness into context. And I highly recommend the 7 episodes prior to this very first one here, because they're all foundational bakes that are going to kind of set the tone for what we're talking about. And it helps you put into context what the map of consciousness is, understanding levels of consciousness, where the teachings are coming from. It's not all coming from me. I've been a student of Dr. David R. Hawkins for over a decade now, and I'm here to kind of share with people a different perspective on how to understand this, because once you understand levels of consciousness, you can start putting your attention on where true power really exists. We're getting ahead of ourselves. We're not going there. Today, we're just talking about how to be happy. So there's a map of consciousness that I'm going to refer to all the time. And again, I want you to go back to the previous episodes where I describe each of them. And on the map of consciousness, the level of consciousness for different types of happiness have been calibrated. So first of all, you should know 200 on the map of consciousness is the doorway to true power and headed up the hill towards happiness, all right? So 200 is where you got to be in order to even start heading in the direction of happiness. So to be glad is 335 on the map of consciousness, which is actually a quantum leap above 200 because this map is logarithmic, meaning 200 on the map of consciousness is 10 to the 200th power, and to be glad is 10 to the 335th power. So that's a huge leap. When you start multiplying 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, 200 times, and then you do it 335 times, it's a huge leap in power and consciousness. So the next level of being happy is happy itself. And I couldn't find the exact figure, but as I recall, it's around 375 on the map of consciousness. Again, that's a huge leap up from being glad. But if you're glad, be glad. Glad is a powerful level of consciousness, and you don't want to dismiss it thinking it's less than happiness, because it's not. It's still powerful and positive aspect oriented, and 85% of the world is not glad. So be happy if you're glad. Be glad that you're glad. Another level of consciousness that's around the happiness, the land of happiness, is playing, and playfulness is 375 on the map of consciousness. So if you're having fun and playing, feel it. You're like, this is what happiness is. This is a powerful state of being. And if you're playing and having fun, you're attracting into your life what you want. Okay, just so you know. And I always like to share, hardworking is 205, I think. It's 205, around there. It's in the low 200s, maybe just 200 on the map of consciousness. Hardworking is positive aspect oriented. Don't dismiss it. But if you're playing and having fun while you're working, your ability to manifest what you want is a quantum leap up from hardworking. Just so you know. Joyful, to be joyful on the map of consciousness, is 540. This is a huge leap up from happiness, and I can attest to this because I've been in the land of joy. The level of consciousness of joy, when you're in it, you realize I am not in Kansas anymore. And I love to use that phrase. I'm going to use it all the time because I've entered high states of consciousness and I'm thinking to myself, I am not in Kansas anymore, just like Dorothy. It can be a little scary because you don't know where you are. I knew I was in joy though. So 540 on the map of consciousness is an amazing place to be. It's an amazing state of grace and beauty and love, and joyfulness is huge. I'm going to ask you to hold tight on that one. Just be aware of where it is. I'm going to point you in the direction, and let's figure out where you're at now. So I'm going to show people that are listening can't see this, but on the video they can. I have a book called The Book of Slides. And the Book of Slides is Dr. Hawkins, who is the teacher of higher calibrated levels of consciousness, and he created the map of consciousness, passed in 2012, and all his beloved students compiled this book of slides because he did lecture series for almost 10 years, and they combined all of these lectures into this book. So it's called The Book of Slides, the complete collection presented at the 2002 to 2011 lectures with clarifications, and they're all by Dr. David R. Hawkins, who's brilliant, by the way, and you can get to know him on YouTube, and I highly recommend it because he's hysterical too. So anyway, in the Book of Slides, he calibrated the correlations of the levels of consciousness and the rate of happiness. So I'm going to ask you to think about this, or don't think too hard, just see what comes to you. How often do you feel you are happy in general? Ignore negative situations that are popping in your head right now. In general, how happy are you? Is it 10% of the time, 20% of the time, half of the time, all the time? If you're happy all the time, that's an indication that you're of higher consciousness. So, of course, the ego is going to like, I'm happy all the time. Although, I was on a podcast interview the other day, and I asked this of the host, and I can tell that he is of higher consciousness when it comes to others and his intention in serving the world. But he said, he came in and said, I'm about happy 55% of the time. So we'll start with that. And I don't want you to judge yourself or disparage yourself at all. If you're not happy, be honest with yourself, because this is gonna, as we go through our weekly doses of higher conscious, my intention is help to bring you up the map. Let's make you happier more of the time. So My intention is to help you do that, and there's ways to go about it. And I'm not charging a thing for this. This is what I love to do, and I'm here to help you. So anyway, so let's start with 200 is the level of consciousness where you're just starting to kick in to positive aspect oriented consciousness. So everything above 200 is positive aspect oriented and uplifting. You're going up the scale of consciousness. If it's below 200, it's a downward pulling energy and downward pulling fields of consciousness that are destructive, and they're going to get you nowhere with what you want. They're only going to continue to get you, have you feeling, you know, anger, hatred, grief, loss, apathy. It's not a good thing. So if you're feeling happy 55% of the time, if that's your number, you are at the level of consciousness of 200. You are at the level, it's called courage, is 200. Stepping into courage on anything is where you start to gain power in your life, all right? So if you're happy 55% of the time, you are positive aspect oriented and you're headed in the right direction. If you are below 55, and we're going to look at the level of pride, which is where 85% of the world calibrates below 200, which is a little discouraging, but I don't want you to be discouraged. It just is what it is. It's an evolution of consciousness. So if you're just below 200, you're happy 22% of the time. That's a huge drop from the courage level. So at courage, you're happy 55% of the time. Below 200, you're happy around 22% of the time. So there's 30% leap in happiness by just making the decision to step into courage on every issue in your life, right? Or as many as you can, right? Some issues you may be afraid of to deal with. So that's kind of what coaches are asking you to do. They're asking you to step into courage to resolve things. And I have had to step into courage on ridiculous things, so horrifically frightening things. And all I got to say, if I can do it, you guys can do it too. So let's talk about, so that's where we're at. When you get into the neutral zone, which is 250 on the map of consciousness, you're happy 60% of the time. And I'm telling you, I was happy just to get up to 200 on anything. I was like grateful to God that I am positively aspect oriented on anything in general and let go of the lower stuff. The lower stuff is suffering and victimhood, and it ain't no fun. So I've done a lot of observation. I'm an observationist of how I feel and what's going on and how I'm shifting. And you can shift into happiness for sure and be glad. You can be glad. And once you just get into courage and neutrality, it's like a huge breath of fresh air. It's like freedom. Even at that seeming, it's lower level, but it's still a high level. 200 and above, you want to hang out there on every topic. And that's my little daily prayer is, God, I thank God I'm above 200 on every topic. It's as simple as that. If you want to go into even greater levels of happiness, you want to be happy more than 55% of the time, you can. You can absolutely do that. And you do that by deciding that you're going to be, right? You make the inner decision that happiness is what you want. And Dr. Hawkins likes to liken it as a compass on a ship, right? You're setting the compass for happiness, and now it's going to head that way. And you've got higher levels of consciousness that are going to greet you all along the way and support you in that effort. And that calibrates as true. As you start to align with higher consciousness comes to meet you. So it's really important to understand, because at lower levels of consciousness, you feel like you're being punished by God. I have been there, and I realized in my own consciousness, there was some mass consciousness belief within me that God is punishing. And we're going to talk about that whole thing in another episode. That's a good one to talk about, but I'm just going to introduce it to you for now. So in reality, God is not punishing. So you got to let go of everything that's lower. Anger, resentment, victimhood, it's all suffering. It stinks. I've been through tremendous suffering on all levels below. So I'm going to my intention is to help you let go of those. Eventually, we're not going to do all that today. That comes in the next couple of weeks. So you've got to decide, I want to be happy. You deserve to be happy, and you are happy. You just have blocks to it. So every spiritual leader of the highest consciousness, Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, Zoroaster, who I don't know who Zoroaster is, but I know they are of the highest consciousness, which is 1,000 on the map of consciousness, which is rare throughout human history. Super rare for humans to have very many above 600. So just to put it into context, people that calibrate at 600 or above on the map of consciousness are rare. And in the past 20 years, there's only been at most, based on Hawkins' research, 22 people above 600. And then they come and go, they pass. And, I think at last count, there were 12. So it's a huge gift for the earth to have human beings that calibrate at 600 or above, because they offset a tremendous amount of negativity. Tremendous. In fact, the Buddha and Christ Krishna at 1,000 on the map of consciousness offset the negativity of an entire planet. You want to talk about power? Holy crow. And I was talking about the level of joy at 540. There's only 0.4% of the world that gets to that level. And I've enjoyed extended periods of time at that level, which is a huge blessing to me and others, because I intend to share that with others in a huge way. It's like you can't help but want to share that level of joy and consciousness with the world. It's amazing grace at 540 and above. However, you can't jump there. You can't force it. And we're going to have a whole other episode about stop trying to force anything. You don't want to force trying to be happy. You don't want to force trying to be glad if you're not there, because you got to let go of what's in the way of it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Is in order to be happy, you have to be willing to step into courage on things that make you angry and let them go. You got to step into courage on being willing to let go of being right about anything, right? And you got to be willing to let go of resentment, fear, grief, and loss, all the lower levels. You've got to come into a willingness to let them go. And we're not going to go into the process of how to let go. We're going to do that 2 episodes from now. Because next episode, I want to talk about letting go and letting God. What does that really mean? So you understand it. We're going to put it into context. We're going to put God into context. It can be put into context for us to understand. And then the week after that, I'm going to do a whole episode on how to let go. And we're going to learn about the mechanism of letting go and how you can actually feel shifts, dramatic shifts, fairly quickly. So now if you're here about how to be happy, I'm going to teach you how to be happy. And right now you may be thinking, I don't want to let go of that anger and that resentment and that positionality I have. I want to be right and this, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I want you to go and look at my episode on lower levels of consciousness. And it's kind of funny. I look at my statistics on who's watching what episode, and the one on higher consciousness is far more viewed than the lower levels one, which is great because you want to aspire to it. But you can't understand where you're at until you look at the lower levels and you understand where you're at, because I want to help you shift. You got to go up the scale. You can't necessarily make a leap, though you can. All right. Sometimes I've noticed that I get into anger and I notice the anger and I'm being with the anger and I'm letting it go. And then I notice I come into righteous pride, which is the next level of consciousness. And I'm like, you know what? I I am willing to accept this energy of righteous pride because it's in me and it has to be expressed. So I'm going to be with it. It needs to come out. The energy of it needs to come out. So we're going to talk about letting go. But for now, I want you to think about how happy are you? What percentage of the time are you happy? And let's work on upping that. Let's set a new goal. If it's less than 20% or less, we have some work to do, but you have more than enough power within you to leap up to half of the time and leap into freedom and neutrality. This is kind of my overarching vision, is to help everyone get up to at least neutral and higher. All right, we're going to talk about the higher realms later. So if you're happy 50% of the time, and this is just another introduction to higher levels of consciousness. And I was talking about this level to the host that was interviewing me the other day. It was fun to talk about it. A level of consciousness that's getting close to happiness is called acceptance. And that calibrates at 350 on the map of consciousness. And that, Dr. Hawkins considers that like a spiritual gateway. And the reason for that is because at this level, you have to be willing to accept you are the creator of your own experience. And maybe you haven't heard it put that way, and maybe you already do accept it, but you don't recognize it as that. And when I first heard that, I did not want to accept it. I said, are you kidding me? I created that mess for me? I would not have chosen that. So this is a huge leap, and getting close to you've passed being glad, all right? So if you're heading towards acceptance, you're going to pass through gladness, which is 335 on the map. So you're getting happier, and you'll be at 335, you're around 70% happy. That's 70%. I feel like I'm probably in the 70s is my guess. Because I'm pretty happy and optimistic and loving and funny and having a good time with life. And I was not always this way. I had to work through some serious lower levels of consciousness and confrontations with hideous ones. Let me tell you, that's a whole other discussion. We'll come across that someday. I'll share some of that stuff you don't want to get into. And I'll share that when I'm telling you, you can't force it. You can't force leaps into higher levels of consciousness if you don't have the foundation under you to do it. And that was my problem. I did not have the foundation under me to leap into the 500s, 600s, 700s, and at one point around 850. I don't think I was at that level, but I was in the presence of that level, which is enormous, amazing grace. All right, so I gave you some little markers, and we're going to be working mostly, 600 and below, because only, very 10 people on the planet care about 600, although there's probably thousands of people that would aspire to get into the 600s. And I can tell you, between 540 and 600, it's heaven on earth. And it's amazing grace, and it's God intoxicated ecstasy, what I like to call it. I mean, there's no other, it's hard to describe. I can't really describe the experiences because they're all unique, but beautiful and flowing. And it's like, whoa, heaven on earth. You can't jump there though, I'll tell you right now, because you have confrontations with the opposite. Okay, we're not going there. That's like a scary story we'll tell over a campfire some night. I'll light a fire behind me and we'll have s'mores and we'll talk about the scary story. All right, so your little exercises decide, all right, where am I on the map? How often am I happy? And do I want to decide to let go of things in the way of happiness? And that affirmation right there, I'm willing to let go of my resistance to happiness. That's one affirmation. Okay, because I want to end, we're going to end it with an affirmation, which we'll do in a second. So there's another thing about happiness I want to share, and it's in Dr. Hawkins' book of slides, which I showed you, and he's got 101 ways to happiness, and I'm just going to share a couple of them today. So the first way to happiness that he shares is to understand. Now, understanding is a high level of consciousness at 400. It's a process in consciousness. And I love to use the map and use the processes of higher consciousness. Why not? We have the map. We have a way to get what we want, so to speak, and to be of higher power. And I'm talking to the ego right now. The ego does like to be of higher power, and I'm going to help you guys with that. So here's 5 steps to happiness from Dr. Hawkins' book of slides. The first one is to understand the source of everything that you seek is within you, not outside of you. And we all struggle with it, like, because we're always outside of ourselves, looking out instead of understanding it's within. And Dr. Hawkins worked with himself, and he was a tremendous psychiatrist, an esteemed psychiatrist. And go look at my episode on Dr. Hawkins. He is tremendous spiritual leader and leader of this research into consciousness. He knows and is aware of and has experienced, as have I, that everything in your way of what you want is inner blocks, which is why you need to let go of the inner blocks, which we're going to learn about as we go along. We're always going to come back. I'm going to be redundant because I needed to hear it 100 times. Most people don't even get it when I suggest the book. So I'm like, okay, we need coaching and we need to be reminded, and you're going to get it. The energy is going to shift and you're going to get it. All right. So the source of happiness is within you. It's not outside. And I can tell you right now, I don't really need anyone to be happy. And this is not a righteous pride energy I'm talking about. You could be, I don't need anyone. That's a righteous pride energy. I'm coming from hopefully, an honest energy that I honestly am quite happy with my life and who I am. And I don't really need anyone outside of me to confirm that to me, because I'm enjoying it. It's fun. I am happy and funny, and I make myself laugh all the time. So it's not that I don't want anyone else in my life. I do, but I don't need it. When you get into this consciousness, you don't need it anymore. It's like, oh, it's a freeing thing. It's a beautiful thing. So if I can remove the inner blocks to happiness, so can you. And we're going to do it together. Okay, this is a big one, and I've noticed this has really shifted for me. So want what you have, okay, instead of having what you want. All right? Be content and appreciative and loving and grateful for what you have. Takes practice. I know it takes practice, because I've been wanting stuff outside of what I already have for a long time. I've spent too much of my energy on it. And I'm like, you know what? That ain't working, because I've got inner blocks to it. So I'm in a place where I could absolutely be resistant and resentful in my life. I could be, but I'm like, you know what? That gets me nowhere. It keeps me stuck where I am. So I finally let go of that. And I have things in my life that I resent. So I let it go. And I just feel better in general. And when you feel better in general, you're aligning with higher levels of consciousness, which is, that's where you need to be in order to manifest what you want. Relationships, material goods, work that you want, vacations you want, whatever you want, right? Loving relationships, a great sex life, right? You got to remove the blocks to all of it. And you don't even have to be that specific. Just intending happiness in general resolves everything else. Everything else lines up right behind it. It's like, oh, here I come. It's a beautiful thing. So you can have preferences, right? Have preferences for things you like in your life, because it's a lighter energy. There's no resistance. There's no shooting all over yourself about it, making judgments. Like, I love and appreciate stuff. That's what I do. I just like, oh, I love that. You know, there's a home I'd like to buy. Oh, I love that home. It's beautiful. I can just enjoy it. Enjoy what you love and what you have, and say, oh, I would love to be, I would prefer if I had a new car this year. I would prefer if I could travel to Europe this year instead of in the United States. Have preferences and feel the energy of love and appreciation for that. That's kind of how you start turning the energy around. You got to play with the energy of it, right? You can feel resistance. You got to let that go. Resistance is a sign like, oh, if you start to go, ugh, you know you're in resistance. Okay. I've already said this one, but I'm going to say it again. Happiness is an inner decision. You got to just decide, I'm done. And I decided I am so done with lower levels of consciousness. It's just a bore. It's freaking boring. And it gets you nowhere and it's no fun. So I'm willing to let go of all of it. And if I have to be alone to do it, you have to leave your family. Not saying you should, but you know, can be helpful. And I had a huge shift in my life when I moved away from my family. Not that I don't love them, but you got to get away from your own crap around your family. It's helpful. You don't want to blame them. You're going to let go of blaming them. But I'm just saying, you got to change your company. Who you keep company with. That's always, you got to pay attention. Who you hanging out with. If you're hanging out with a complainer, you know, a victim, it gets old. You got to find someone who's uplifting. Hopefully I can be that for you. I will not go down. I mean, I have love and compassion and understanding for victimhood, but it ain't getting you nowhere. They get you nowhere. And when you get out of there, did you hear my New England accent? I am from New England originally, you guys. But I live in Colorado, outside of Aspen, not too far outside of Aspen, with John Denver, my Rocky Mountain High song. That's my soul calling, is that song. Anyway, happiness is an inner decision. Decide, like something like, when I first got married, my husband at the time just said, I'm not going to smoke anymore. It's an inner decision. I'm done. So decide to be happy. And then life is going to start aligning you, and the higher levels of energy, you're going to, energy fields are going to start coming to you and supporting you with that effort. They want, life is loving. Life is loving, whether you believe it or not. Okay, next one, give up, poor me. This is the victim. There's a ton of victimhood out there. I still am a victim. I still got victim crap running, but I notice it. And I'm willing to release the need to be a victim. That's a great affirmation. I'm willing to release the need to be a victim. Everything below 200 is victimhood. That's all it is. It is victimhood. And you can have compassion and understanding for it, and you are allowed to feel the way you feel. But what I'm asking you to do is you got to notice how you feel and be willing to let it come up, because it's there. I'm going to talk about this later in our letting go episode. And take a look at the lower level map. Go through my lower level map and see where you're at. So if you're in anger, you're feeling angry, please feel angry. Just don't lash out at somebody. You got to kind of be with it. And then what comes up after anger? Anger could lead to righteous pride, resentment, which is good. It's a good thing. Just notice it. It's like, okay, I'm getting up there. I'm coming into power, and watch when you shift into neutrality or courage or something like that. Then you know you let it out. We'll talk about this later. So give up the victim. Victimhood is rampant in this world, which is fine. There was judgment in that. I'm letting go of the judgment of victimhood, because I care to be compassionate and understanding. That's what I'm working on. I'm willing to understand. We all go through it. It's part of human life, but it's a good idea to let it go. You want to choose what you want. I've already mentioned this. He's saying it again here. So have preferences and choose what you want in your life instead of craving, wanting, desiring, or getting. Those words, that level is around 125 on the map, and it doesn't lead to anything good. It leads to frustration and anger and hatred, to have a cravingness and a wantingness and a desire. Unless, of course, you're coming up from grief and fear and loss and apathy. It's actually a good sign to actually want something again, because lower than that, you don't want anything. You're apathetic and in despair, which I've been there. I know what it feels like to want nothing and feel nothing. So if you're in wanting, craving, desiring, and getting, be grateful, but notice. You're like, oh, well, this is good. I actually want something again. That's a sign of interest and power, interest in life and power. Okay, so we're coming to the end of this episode on how to be happy. And it's just a starter kit. And I do want to mention some movies, because Dr. Hawkins calibrates the level of consciousness of movies, which is a good idea, so you know what you're watching. And I chose a few movies that I have loved, and they calibrate at 395 on the map of consciousness, which is higher than happiness, but it's kind of a mix. There's a mix going on in all of us. We are a mixed bag of consciousness. So Shakespeare in Love is 395. I loved that with Gwyneth Paltrow. That was an awesome movie. It's no wonder I loved it. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. That's with Jimmy Stewart, who you can't help but love that one. He is of higher consciousness because he's so funny and loving and generous. Driving Miss Daisy, 395 on the map of consciousness. And pay attention. It's no wonder you feel good watching some of these movies. Pretty Woman with Julia Roberts and Richard Gere is 375, still a very high consciousness, as well as Jerry Maguire with Tom Cruise and Cuba Gooding Jr. and what's her name? Sorry, actress, if you're watching this. I know your name. Renee Zellweger, yes. Those three. They created a tremendous movie that calibrates at 395, 75 on the map of consciousness. And I'm going to have an episode on the movie Legally Blonde. And because I don't know why, I study consciousness and I understand levels. And when I watch a movie, I see what's going on in consciousness, and it's fun for me to observe and I get ideas around it. And when I watch Legally Blonde, which calibrates at 355, there is a lot of loving, happiness, goodness going on in that movie. And I'm going to share it in one of my episodes, maybe after we do the how-to letting go stuff, because you guys need to know about that. So look for the, I'm going to take How to Be Happy from the Legally Blonde movie playbook. And Elle Wood, who was the lead character played by Reese Witherspoon. That'll be a fun episode to look forward to. Okay, so I promised affirmations. Affirmations are super powerful, but I've noticed I've had a hard time sometimes saying them, and now I understand perhaps why. So an affirmation for happiness is to say, I am happy. That's a powerful affirmation, for sure. However, if you don't believe it, you don't believe you're really happy, then you're going to offset it by that negative vibration that you go on. You have that vibration going on that's resistant to that statement because you don't believe it's true. So I have found, and I learned this from Louise Hay's book, How to Heal Your Life. And she, if you haven't heard of Louise Hay, she passed as well not too long ago, but she's the founder of Hay House Publishing. And that How to Heal Your Life is a huge bestseller, and it started her publishing company. But she talks about affirmations and how powerful they are. And they are powerful because it's actually a process in consciousness when you hit the level of 200. So my feeling is, if you're below 200 on a topic like happiness, you don't feel that you're happy, there's a lot of resistance going on. So it's going to be difficult for you to say, I am happy, until it isn't. So I don't want you to force it, because while you're forcing it, saying, I am happy, thinking it's going to work, you're still running the vibration of, no, I'm not, no, I'm not, no, I'm not. Trust me, I know. I'm just telling you, I know this is what I've gone through myself. So She has a statement that starts with, I am willing to release the need to be fill in the blank. I'm willing to release the need to be unhappy in general. Or if you have a topic you know that you can work around that shouldn't be too hard to become happy on, start with a simple one, like I'm willing to release the need to be unhappy at work, whatever. Fill in the blank, or just I'm willing to release the need to be unhappy. And just so you know, willingness is a powerful level of consciousness, 310. It's powerful. And Louise must have intuitively knew, or she had guidance, willingness, she had guidance from higher consciousness that this is the word to use because the energy is powerful for the shift. And it comes in at 310 on the map of consciousness. And to release is also a process in consciousness at, I think it's 250. Let me check. I don't know why I don't have it right here. Release. Yeah. Release is a process at 250, which is neutral. It's a process in consciousness. So I like to play with the map. Let's go where there's power. So I'm willing to release the need to be unhappy. It's a great affirmation to start because you're willing to let go of resistance. And you're going to feel it. You're going to feel the energy start to lighten up. And eventually you're going to say, I'm happy. That's what happened to me. I'm like, I'm going to start with the willingness to release. And others may think it's a negatively oriented thing, but it's a willingness to let go of resistance. You're letting it go slowly. The energy's letting go. And you're going to come into a place where you can actually start to affirm something. And I feel like that's an indication that you're shifting. You're going into higher levels when you can actually affirm something confidently. And I'm able to affirm, I am happy, healthy, wealthy, and wise confidently. And it doesn't matter. Like, that's my affirmation, because happy, healthy, wealthy, and wise is in the consciousness field of like 350 into 400. 350, 400. I'm kind of aligning myself with a new field. And Santa Claus, by the way, is at 390, and that's my goal. My intention is to align with the level of consciousness of the concept of Santa Claus. I mean, there's play going on there, there's generosity, there's fun, there's love. You got it all going on with Santa. And happy, healthy, wealthy, and wise is all up there in 350 and above. So it's a nice little thing to aspire to. Though my new aspiration is joy, 540. But only when I'm ready. I tell life, only when I'm ready. I don't need to leap there. I know it's awesome, but only when I'm ready. So these affirmations, willingness, I'm willing to release the need to fill in the blank. Play with that one this week. Play with, I'm willing to release the need to be unhappy. That's our lesson for the week. And start feeling the shift. Or if you have something really strongly going on, I'm willing to release the need to be resentful. I'm willing to let it go and align with higher consciousness of it. Set your intention. I'm willing to align with higher consciousness on this. Just so you know, this is really powerful information. All levels of consciousness are impersonal attractor fields, period. They're impersonal and they're attractor fields. That's it. You got to look at the map, which is great that we have the map now. We can now align ourselves with context of like, all right, where do I want to be? Where am I at? How can I go up? All right, set your intention, because you wouldn't know otherwise. We don't know. We're humans. We don't know, understand consciousness. I mean, I can barely spell it every time I write it. What does it mean? So knowing that you're choosing to be angry is an attractor field for the level of consciousness of anger, period. That attractor field is like a magnet to you now. That's it. This is free will, right? You think God's punishing you? No. Higher consciousness is aware that you're choosing it, and you're allowed to choose it until you decide, I don't want this anymore, I need help, okay? So when you're in the lower levels and you keep giving it your attention, and trust me, I understand feeling like you're stuck there, feeling like you can't change it. You can, but you got to call on higher consciousness for help. got to bring in the higher consciousness. And I just asked for it. I'm like, I'm so grateful for aligning with higher consciousness. And they're not going to come. If you're of higher consciousness, you're not going to go down here unless you're asked to help. So higher consciousness is like, okay, well, we're going to do our best at every level. There's gazillions of levels between every level, right? Because they're logarithmic. That's huge. The vast field of consciousness is quantum in nature. So pick a level you know you can get to or work on, and allow the field of that intention to help you along. So, last thing, I want to get back to our quiz. Did you have time to think? You shouldn't have had time to really think about the quiz because, you know, I wanted to engage you in how to be happy. So the quiz today, let me just look at it again, was, what do you think is of higher consciousness? Being salt of the earth, being supportive, or being loyal? All right. All of them are of higher consciousness. That's the good news. So if someone calls you the salt of the earth, that's a great praise and of higher consciousness. Salt of the earth calibrates at 240 on the map of consciousness. That's almost at the level of neutrality, which is 250. And salt of the earth people, they do not need to be right about anything, which is awesome. They're very easygoing. And supportive is 245 on the map. So it's still a quantum leap up from salt of the earth. 240 to 245 is a big leap. But all of us have all of these qualities within us. If you look at the map and you read about each level, you'll recognize yourself on something in your life. So supportive is even more powerful in consciousness than being salt of the earth, but they're all good. There's no, you don't want to, just because it's higher does not mean better. Trust me. I got super high. It did not serve me in the end. Did, you know, for a while, but it didn't serve me in the end. So being loyal is a leap up from salt of the earth and supportive at 345 on the map of consciousness. So to be a loyal friend, you're operating from a higher level of consciousness. And to actually feel loyalty within yourself, you'll feel it as opposed to making it up. You think you're a loyal friend, but, you know, so look at different friendships and say, am I being loyal here? Am I being loyal there? And there'll be friends who are like, yeah, I don't need to be loyal. They weren't loyal to me. So mind you, that attitude is of lower consciousness, which is fine until you realize it. I mean, I personally am constantly, you know, catching myself. I'm like, okay, that was a low vibe, but I laugh it off because it is within all of us. So embrace this, and getting, you know, putting all this into context helps you understand where you're at, where you want to be, and recognize these pieces of you that you already have that are of higher consciousness. So next week, we're going to talk about letting go and letting God. What the heck does that mean? We're going to put God into context just to keep it make it simpler for us to follow the map of where we want to be. And it's really great understanding. And Dr. Hawkins talks about letting go and letting God and understanding where true power is. And I'm going to kind of share what I've learned from him. And then the week after that, we're going to learn how to let go. And you're going to probably come back to it again and again and again because you need kind of support, and you're going to get it. Because I'm like, I'm doing it. Are things changing? And yes, they are. But I didn't feel like, I'm going to talk my way with you on what to look for and how to let go and start to see vast changes in your level of consciousness. And Dr. Hawkins, who was a psychiatrist for like 50 years, he had the biggest psychiatric practice in Manhattan at one time, which is huge. I mean, you're going to see the worst human suffering in a place like Manhattan for sure. And even though he was a highly intellectual, brilliant, probably genius level psychiatrist, he recognized that the mechanism of letting go, which he kind of shares and developed, is like a rocket ship relative to everyday psychiatry or any other type of alternative practice or therapy. So I'm all for the rocket ship. And I took a rocket ship to Mars and back, by the way. That's a whole other story. All right, so that's 2 weeks from this episode. We're going to talk about how to let go. And then maybe I'll do that Legally Blonde one after that. We'll see. We'll see what comes to me. There's so much good stuff to talk about. I'm excited to share it all with you and to help you guys listening shift from where you are today to where you want to be whenever. All right, I think that's it. If you like what's going on here, please like us on social media, like me, the topic. Our podcast you can find at trumpeteroftruthradio.com. If you follow along on YouTube, it's at trumpeteroftruth.tv.com. And I'd love it if you're finding this helpful to comment anywhere, or my website, trumpeteroftruth.com. I love Trumpeter of Truth. There's a whole story about that on one of the earlier episodes, why I call myself the Trumpeter of Truth. It's kind of funny. And my intention is to raise the level of consciousness of the earth, which is currently at around 207 to around 250. And I can't do that alone. I need you guys. I need my peeps. We as a collective can do it for sure, but that's a huge leap. That's a big ask. But, I know who we're talking to. Creator of all things is like, we'll do what we can. It's okay if we do. It's okay if we don't. It doesn't matter. But, to get the whole planet into neutral, that's a pretty healthy planet, if you ask me. It's a good direction to go. But, we're here forever and a day, and I've been shown eternity in a revelation. I've been brought through eternity 2 or 3 times, at least twice, if not 3 times, have been shown eternity. This is a revelation. Revelations come in the 500s. I've had a few. They're a little overwhelming, but we are eternal. What's the hurry? If we don't get to 250 in this lifetime, there's no hurry. If we drop, 10 points, there's no hurry. We get an eternity to figure it all out. And I'm going to leave you with this. I'm going to say it at the end of every episode. Hopefully I'll remember. Love is the truth. The power of consciousness of love is huge. And the only reason you wouldn't believe it is because you haven't experienced it and you're not even there yet. So we're working towards that, honey buns. Love is the truth. See you next time.